Charles Manson. Charles Manson was the prison school drifter who refashioned himself into a desert guru and orchestrated murders that made America's psyche flinch forever. Born the 12th of November 1934 in Cincinnati, he led the Manson family commune, whose followers killed at least 9 people in July-August 1969, including Sharon Tate, before he was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy in 1971, despite not wielding the knife himself. His power wasn't mystical. It was predatory charisma plugged into a cultural socket he mixed. Beatles-fueled apocalyptic riffs, prison-learned manipulation, and Hollywood proximity via Beach Boy Dennis Wilson to bait, bind, and direct fractured youths. The impact is grotesque math. Tate LaBianca becomes cultural shorthand for ritual horror, and Helter Skelter turns from song to doom slogan. While prosecutors argued he sought a race war nobody else got the memo for. Irony tax. He chased a record deal harder than a revelation. The Beach Boys recorded his song uncredited. The industry ghosted him, and the Messiah Act became the only stage left. Final thought? Watch how a failed musician reverse engineers family out of control, then scripts loyalty into murder. That's not prophecy, it's stage direction with blood. Jim Jones. Jim Jones was the Indiana-born preacher who fused Pentecostal theatrics with socialist utopia and built a machine that ground devotion into obedience. Born the 13th of May, 1931, in Crete, Indiana, he founded People's Temple in the 1950s, migrated to California for political clout, then relocated to Guyana to build Jonestown, a remote settlement presented as paradise and run like a labor camp. Impact is catastrophic calculus. On the 18th of November, 1978, after the ambush and murder of Congressman Leo Ryan at Port Kaituma airstrip, 909 people died in a mass murder-suicide via cyanide-laced drink, including over 200 children, making it the deadliest deliberate loss of American civilian life before 9/11. The mechanism was ritualized control, white nights rehearsals, armed watch, sleep deprivation, public confessions, and a final order framed as revolutionary suicide while defectors were hunted at the runway. The contradiction gnaws. He integrated pews and ran social programs while staging fake healings, siphoning money, and tightening surveillance as paranoia bloomed. Final bite. He promised a socialist Eden and delivered a command economy of fear, where every human became collateral on a debt only his delusions could collect. David Koresh. David Koresh was the Texas-based Branch Davidian leader who read Revelation like a field manual and treated time as a weapon. Born Vernon Wayne Howell on the 17th of August, 1959, he seized leadership of the Branch Davidians and fortified the Mount Carmel Center near Waco, where an ATF raid on the 28th of February, 1993, became a firefight that killed 4 agents and 6 Davidians and triggered a 51-day siege under FBI control. Impact arrives in fire and smoke on the 19th of April, 1993. After hours of CS gas insertion by armored vehicles, the compound burned and 79 Davidians died inside, including at least 21 children, with autopsies showing many gunshot deaths and Koresh dead from a head wound of uncertain origin. The inner logic was coercive piety, multiple spiritual wives, including minors, weapons, stockpiles, and bargaining delays, to write his interpretation of the 7 seals before any surrender. The long shadow is cultural shrapnel, a symbol of state overreach to some and predatory prophecy to others, a rallying cry for extremists and a cautionary study for negotiators and law enforcement. Closing line. When a leader convinces followers that apocalypse is a schedule, every negotiation becomes choreography inside a burning clock. Shoko Asahara. Shoko Asahara was the legally blind founder of Aum Shinrikyo, who industrialized doomsday and turned mass transit into a test site for annihilation. Born Chizuo Matsumoto in 1955, he fused esoteric Buddhism, Hindu deities, and Christian apocalypse, recruited scientists, and built chemical and biological programs that chased prestige and power behind a veil of enlightenment. Impact is forensic horror. On the 20th of March 1995, Aum members punctured sarin packets on Tokyo subway lines, converging at Kasumigaseki, killing 13 and injuring thousands, an attack that could have killed far more if their improvised deployment had been efficient. The crackdown was swift and sprawling, Police raided dozens of facilities, seized precursors, arrested physicians and chemists, and captured Asahara in May 1995 as confessions tied him to nerve agent production and orders. The paradox is chilling. A meditation dojo that hoarded cash, built labs, plotted assassinations, and rehearsed terror while promising liberation from suffering. Final verdict. Faith without breaks is one thing. Faith with a laboratory badge and grievance becomes a factory for nightmares. Myung Moon. Myung Moon was the Korean evangelist who claimed a messianic mandate and scaled devotion through media, politics, and matchmaking until influence felt like destiny. He founded the Unification Church in South Korea, preached family engineering through mass weddings, and built transnational businesses and lobbying that wrapped theology in spectacle and access. The effect was institutional charisma, photo lines with power brokers, newspapers and enterprises, and ceremonies that stitched private faith to public theater. Critics alleged manipulation and financial control, while adherents testified to purpose and community, a tug of war between autonomy and belonging staged in stadiums. Closing pulse. When a ritual scales to thousands at once, devotion becomes logistics, and the sermon sounds like a keynote for the soul. Marshall Applewhite. Marshall Applewhite was the soft-spoken former music teacher who refashioned himself as Dew and piloted Heaven's Gate into a choreographed exit toward an imagined spacecraft. Born the 17th of May, 1931, in Texas, he partnered with Bonnie Nettles, preached that bodies were vehicles, enforced celibacy, and in several cases, approved voluntary castration to sever earthly ties before the final departure. Impact is a frozen tableau. In March 1997, 39 members were found dead in a Rancho Santa Fe mansion, dressed alike, after ingesting phenobarbital with alcohol while believing Hail Bop masked their ride to the next level. The structure was monastic and micromanaged. Members surrendered possessions, cut family contact, worked in tech services for income, and lived by exacting rules down to hairstyles and meal prep. A bitter aside, the group's cosmic faith wrapped around Applewhite's shame and obsession with purity, turning identity into a hardware problem that mutilation could fix. Final flare. When a leader renames desire as software noise, death starts to look like a system update, and the reboot is a cliff. Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh. Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh was the Indian guru who built Rajneeshpuram in Oregon and accidentally invented the world's worst salad bar. Born the 11th of December, 1931, he preached dynamic meditation and free love. Then, his lieutenants, led by Ma Anand Sheela, chased political control and crossed into bioterror. Impact is statistical nausea. In 1984, salmonella contamination of 10 restaurant salad bars in the Dalles sickened 751 people, the largest bioterror attack in U.S. history, designed to sway a county election by keeping voters home. The machine behind it included a clinic and lab inside the commune, mail-order microbes, and a bunker mentality that endorsed crimes from wiretaps to an aborted assassination plot, a spiritual city that ran like a spy thriller. Odd twist, Rajneesh himself kept a fleet of Rolls-Royces and blamed subordinates when it all imploded, a guru of detachment, riding luxury like it was doctrine. Closing snap, when utopia hires a lab tech, enlightenment gets plated as culture on agar and the sermon is delivered with a pipette. David Berg. David Berg was the itinerant preacher who founded Children of God and turned intimacy into a weapon that scarred a generation. Born the 18th of February 1919, he launched the movement in California, rebranded it as The Family, and exported communes worldwide with a theology that eroticized evangelism. Impact is a long echo of harm. Allegations and testimonies detail child sexual abuse, coercive control, and flirty fishing, a practice instructing members to use sex to recruit new followers, which drew raids and legal scrutiny in multiple countries. The organization later banned sex with minors and attempted a reputation rehab as the Family International, shrinking to a smaller online community in the 2000s and 2010 while survivors kept telling their stories. Contradiction burns. A gospel of love was engineered into a consent demolition derby that left kids negotiating theology with predators. Final reckoning. When a leader declares desire divine, boundaries dissolve, and the holiest word in the room becomes no one left to say no. Warren Jeffs. Warren Jeffs was the FLDS prophet who turned priesthood into a prison schedule and wrote family law as a sentencing guideline. Born the 3rd of December 1955, he inherited control of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, arranged marriages for underage girls, and centralized power from Short Creek to the YFC Ranch in Texas. Impact is judicial and enduring. Placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted in 2006, convicted as an accomplice to rape in Utah in 2007, later overturned on instruction grounds, then convicted in Texas in 2011 of aggravated sexual assault of a child, and sentenced to life with parole eligibility in 2038. The apparatus was totalizing, reassignment of wives, banishments, confiscation of property, and recorded sermons that prosecutors used to map the theology of control onto specific crimes. The sour note is that a prophet's word became a logistics manual for abuse, where holiness was measured in the distance from consent. Final verdict. When revelation is one man's diary, the margins fill with victims, and the signature is a life sentence. Tony Alamo. Tony Alamo was the rhinestone-suited televangelist who built a traveling ministry into a coercive empire and treated followers like inventory. Born the 20th of September 1934, as Bernie Lazar Hoffman, he and wife Susan founded the Alamo Christian Foundation in 1969, mixing anti-Catholic screeds, free labor, and mail-order salvation into a revenue machine that sprawled across California, Arkansas, and Tennessee. Impact comes with a gavel. After tax battles and labor violations, he was convicted in 2009 on 10 federal counts for transporting minors across state lines for sex, with victims testifying they were married to him as children, and he died in prison in 2017. The curiosities are morbid and telling. He kept Susan's corpse on display for weeks and promised resurrection. He ran bedazzled denim businesses while fighting the IRS over millions. And judges ruled the church operated primarily for the couple's private benefit. Beneath the sequins was a grim ledger. Loyalty was tallied in unpaid work, bodies were notarized as marriages, and salvation was invoiced like merchandise. If charisma is credit and fear is collateral, the bill arrives stamped with prison and a legacy of hurt. Order of the Solar Temple. The Order of the Solar Temple was a velvet-robed apocalypse club that translated medieval mystique into modern pyres. Founded by Luc Jouret and Joseph DiMambro, it blended Templar cosplay with New Age cosmology and promised a transit to Sirius that sounded like poetry and read like a death plan. Impact is a staggered catastrophe. Between 94 and 97, 74 members died in Switzerland, Canada, and France. Many drugged, shot, or suffocated before fires consumed the sites, with only a fraction conclusively suicides, according to Swiss investigators. The backstage notes are chilling. Leaders scripted posthumous manifestos, sorted victims into traitors, immortals, and awakened, and tried to engineer a body count symbolic of burned Templars. The contradiction is theatrical sacred language draped over homicide logistics, a ritual calendar that demanded corpses to prove a point. Final ember. When transcendence is marketed as an exit, the door is often locked from the outside, and the key is a match.